Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 17th episode of 2023. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast, and our gold sponsor, Gray Bar. Lots happening in Washington, D.C., and a few highlights include the House Energy Commerce Subcommittee on Communications and Technology held a hearing on broadband permitting last week. Multiple ideas to help streamline permitting were discussed, and the Fiber Broadband Association's working with the committees as the bills are being advanced. One bill that was introduced by Congresswoman Eshoo is the Community Broadband Act, which will enable all communities to have access to experienced broadband providers that include municipalities, tribes, utilities, co-ops, public and private partnerships, and nonprofits across the U.S. Also, NTI has made their limited short-term middle mile BABA, the Build America, Buy America, Build America, I forget what that is, waiver public. The key difference between the draft released in the fall and now is that the fiber optic cable has been removed from the waiver. So the waiver is issued until March 1st, 2024. If you want to see what the waiver looks like, you can go view it on the Department of Commerce website under Approved Waiver section. Also, as part of the NTI BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity, there's a requirement that each eligible entity submit their initial proposal describing the BEAD challenge process, under which a unit of local government, nonprofit, or a business broadband service provider may challenge a determination made by the eligible entity in the initial proposal as to whether a particular location or community anchor institute is eligible for BEAD funding, including whether a particular location is unserved or underserved. NTI is seeking comments by May 5th on the challenge process notice and also on the BEAD model challenge process. So please, if you have some comments, you got till May 5th to reply on those. Our next regional Fiber Connect workshop is coming up quickly and will be held on May 16th in Austin, Texas. This will be a really important event, especially given that Texas may be eligible up to $3 billion in BEAD funding. So you're not going to want to miss that. Please register today, as the hotels and workshops will sell out. Also, please join us tomorrow, Thursday, April 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern for our FCGA, the FTTH Council Global Alliance webinar, Sustainability Survey, a global view from the Fiber to the Home Council Global Alliance. We conducted a global sustainability survey, and we'll be sharing the results during this webinar. You can register at our fiberbroadband.org website under webinars. That brings us today's Fiber Breakfast with John Schulz, AT&T's Director of Sustainability Integration, on a topic that is called Fiber, a Climate Hero. But before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce Trish Ehlers from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thanks, Gary, and good morning to everyone who's joined us today. Before I go over a few logistical items, I'd like to once again thank the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco, and our gold sponsor, Gray Bar. Now, if you'd all keep in mind that you're all in listen mode only, to ask a question, just type it into the question box located within your control panel on the right side of your screen. We'll host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's webinar. The presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. You can find it under the Events tab on the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. If you take a minute to do that, we appreciate your input. I'll pass it back to Gary now to introduce our panelists and get us started. Gary?
Thanks, Trish, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, we heard from Larry Thompson, the CEO of Vantage Point, on unlicensed wireless. Is it suitable for closing the digital divide? Larry just completed a white paper examining why unlicensed wireless is not appropriate for BEAD funding. If you missed it, the white paper is posted on the Fiber Broadband Association's website, and you can find a replay of last week's webinar on our website under events. That brings us to today's Fiber Breakfast session with John Schulz, AT&T's Director of Sustainability Integration on the topic is Fiber, a Climate Hero. John Schulz is the Director of Sustainability Integration at AT&T. In this role, John works with customers, technology collaborators, AT&T businesses, and leading independent third parties to identify how AT&T connectivity can help address climate change. John began his AT&T career in the corporate real estate group, and he migrated into leadership roles with energy and corporate sustainability organizations. So welcome, John, and for our audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work them into the Q&A at the end. With that, I'd like to get things started, and I'll turn it over to John.
Well, Gary, thank you very much, and thanks for having me on the agenda this morning. I want to talk about climate today. It's an issue that's becoming more and more important. There was a new IPCC report that just came out. I happened to be at an event last night that was talking about water. Climate is front and center in a lot of today's news. We're seeing it almost every day, the impacts of climate change. And so I thought it'd be important to talk about it and maybe ask a provocative question, which is, can fiber or connectivity more broadly play a critical role in addressing climate change? And at AT&T, we believe the answer is yes. So in the next slide, I'll show a stat that I think validates the importance of the topic. As a bit of personal history, I've been working in this area for over 15 years. And when I started, whatever you called it, climate change, corporate social responsibility, sustainability, whatever you wanted to call it, there was a lot of talking about it. And a few people were trying to integrate it into the way that we thought about things, but it was on the edges. That is no longer the case. Today, addressing climate change as a risk or an opportunity is becoming increasingly important to businesses. This statistic is one that you can find. There are lots of surveys out there that will show you that this issue is becoming more and more important. And from where I sit, it's a pretty obvious reason. The reason is not only the news that you hear, but also pressure. Good old pressure is a great change agent and a great provides a great sense of urgency. And pressure to address climate change is coming from more and more sources these days. It's coming from your customers, it's coming from your competitors, it's coming from regulators in some cases, and and if you're a public company, it's coming from investors. The number of surveys that we get from our customers is going through the roof. All of our customers want to know how AT&T is thinking about climate change. I suspect you guys are feeling that similar pressure. And so the question becomes, well, what are we doing about it? How are we addressing this climate change risk? And so on the next slide, I'll share a little bit about how AT&T thinks about that. The first question that we get is, AT&T, what are you doing within your operations to reduce the impact of climate change? And the top line metric and goal that we have in place is that we aim to be carbon neutral by 2035. That essentially means that we will work hard to reduce our emissions through energy efficiency. Electricity is our largest source of emissions, so we're working hard to reduce that within our own operations. The other large source of emissions for us is our mobile fleet, and we're actively looking to optimize the use of those vehicles and also transition to electric vehicles. We're also a huge player when it comes to large-scale renewable energy, and we'll continue to do that until our emissions are down to zero by 2035. So we've got a good plan for ourselves, and that puts our customers' minds at ease. Where I think we have an opportunity as an expert in connectivity is that we believe connectivity can play a fundamental role in helping our customers be more efficient and helping our customers reduce their greenhouse gas emissions as they pursue their set of emissions reduction goals. Many of our customers are setting goals just like we have, whether it's carbon neutral or net zero or a science-based target. Our customers are setting these kinds of goals just like we are for the same reasons, right? They recognize the importance of the issue and are feeling that pressure. And we believe connectivity can help them achieve those goals. The thing is, connectivity opens your eyes to things you couldn't see before. Connections like fiber-enabled connectivity to buildings, IoT, Internet of Things connections to mobile assets. This connectivity provides access to data that can be analyzed and can be used to drive efficiency. It can save costs, it can save time, and oftentimes that visibility can help reduce emissions. So we took that concept to heart, and we put our money where our mouth is, if you will, and we set a public goal. The time frame is the same as our internal goal to be carbon neutral. It's by 2035, we will help enable our customers to reduce a gigaton of greenhouse gas emissions. A gigaton is 1 billion metric tons. It's a big number. If you think about getting in an airplane and traveling from New York City to Los Angeles, the emissions from that airplane, if you were to do it 1.6 billion times, that's a gigaton. So it's a big number, and we put ourselves on the hook to help our customers reduce emissions at that kind of scale. Now let's be clear. I think that it's great to have a metric out there. It's great to have a number that we're shooting for, but we view this goal, our gigaton goal, as a symbol and an inspiration, hopefully, and a reminder, right, that we think connectivity should be considered when our customers are thinking about their emissions reduction plan. So we like to think that by setting this goal, we're helping to inspire, and we certainly are engaging our customers in a big way in this conversation about, how can connectivity like fiber, Internet of Things, 5G, how do these connectivity tools that we provide open doors to opportunities for our customers? So on the next slide, I'll give you a few examples. To get to that gigaton goal, we are looking to create more smart climate solutions. That's the name that we've given to any sort of application that uses connectivity to get rid of inefficiency, to get rid of waste. So if you think about how we can use less electricity, less fuel, even water and raw materials, when you're more efficient with the use of those resources, greenhouse gas emissions go down. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for smart climate solutions that drive efficiency in those areas. And what we found is the big hitters, right, the areas where we need to make the most advancements are in areas like transportation, industrial and energy, these high intensity, emissions intensity areas, and even agriculture. These are all areas that some obviously and some maybe less obviously use those resources that generate greenhouse gas emissions. And we think we've got a nice suite of connectivity solutions like fiber, IoT, and 5G, sometimes edge computing, network virtualization, voice and collaboration. These tools that we provide to our customers, we think can be enablers. So if you think about transportation, vehicles are a huge source of emissions in the United States and across the world. And so you think about how a connected fleet is more efficient than a non-connected fleet. I think about when I joined AT&T, and the only information we had about our vehicles was the credit card bills that we paid at the end of the month. Now leap forward, and now we know exactly how to optimize routing. We know how to monitor idling and acceleration to reduce wasted fuel. So we're using, connectivity enables fleet operators to be much more efficient. We're also now using the insights that we get from our telematics solution to plan for our transition to electric vehicles, right? This kind of insight allows us to identify this group of vehicles as a great candidate for electrification, these other maybe not yet. So again, the idea of a theme of creating visibility through connectivity can be a great enabler as we optimize the old way of transportation and migrate to new ways of transporting ourselves and goods. When you think about industrial applications, you think about factories, you think about industrial sites. Again, the idea of having a connected factory, maybe it's a fiber connected factory that has devices that are connected, so operators can see where electricity, where resources, fuel, raw materials, how they're being used to optimize it. That reduces cost, it helps increase productivity, it saves time, and it oftentimes reduces emissions. We think industrial applications, especially high emitting areas like steel and cement, if we can get those types of that kind of intelligence into those operations, maybe we can help reduce the emissions in those areas. Energy is a huge source of emissions, of course. When you think about the old world of oil and gas and coal, even, we're working with those types of producers to understand their operations better, see where waste is occurring, where methane leaks are occurring, which is a big source of emissions, trying to optimize the performance of the old world, but at the same time working with new world energy and renewable service providers to optimize the generation of clean, renewable energy. And lastly, agriculture is maybe one that's less obvious, but when you think about the amount of fuel that goes into the trucks and vehicles that are on the field, the amount of fertilizer, which is oftentimes based in petrochemicals and water, all of these are emission sources. And so we work with a lot of innovative companies that are looking to use sensors to collect information from the fields, from the vehicles, and optimize the use of resources in the agriculture world as well. So we feel there's a lot of opportunity. The challenge of climate change is very real and daunting, but we have to be optimistic and look for solutions. And we feel like our connectivity solutions, including things like fiber, IoT, and 5G, can play a big role. But we realize we can't do this on our own. And so on my next slide, and my last slide, and we'll get to the good part with the questions, is a little bit of information about something that we created back in 2021 when we announced our gigaton goal. And it's called the Connected Climate Initiative. And when we look at our role in addressing climate change, we feel that we do play a fundamental and critical role. But we realize we need to collaborate, and we need to work with other experts with complementary technology, complementary expertise to develop robust solutions that can be scaled. And so the Connected Climate Initiative is all about that theme of intentional collaboration, bringing complementary services together to bring really high impact solutions to market. And so we're at the beginning of our journey. The roster includes leading technology brands like Salesforce and Microsoft, service integrators like Deloitte, industrial partners like Duke Energy and Badger Meter, as well as leading thought leaders from some prominent nonprofit organizations and academic universities that are helping us do research in this area. So we realize we can't do it ourselves, and are openly and actively looking to collaborate with other leaders that are of the same mind, recognizing the critical nature of addressing climate change, but also looking to play a role in addressing that challenge. So Gary, thanks for letting me run through my spiel there, and we covered a lot of ground, but happy to take any questions.
Well, John, yeah, this is really interesting, and really appreciate AT&T taking the leadership on this. So I can't even imagine, if I look back in my career when your central offices used to be steppers, and then they had to move to digital switching, and now, I mean, do you have a feel for how much real estate you guys reclaimed and how much power you reduced by where you are as far as the evolution of technology?
Yeah, we are all over that. we track that like a hawk. I mentioned our internal efforts to reduce our carbon footprint to zero. I mentioned our largest footprint, as you said, is the use of electricity to power the equipment that runs the network, but also the cooling that keeps the buildings and that equipment cool. So we recognize very quickly that electricity is the big lever for us. And so we've actually leveraged this idea of a connected building. The reason we think this is such an important lever that we can pull for our customers is because we've done it for ourselves. We now have over 1,000 of our buildings are connected, meaning that we've got information coming from all different points of electricity use in those buildings, and it comes to a single dashboard that allows us to track that electricity usage in almost near real time. If you think about, I mentioned how antiquated our fleet was when I started. We were antiquated with our buildings as well. We would get an electric bill 45 days after the close of the month, and sometimes there would be a spike, and we would not know why until it was far too late. We're well past that now, and we now have real time, on that day information that sends an alert to say when something has changed. So all that to say is we absolutely have done a good job of pinpointing that electricity use and investing in thousands of energy efficiency programs over the last decade to help bend that curve. And so I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but if you want to go to att.com/CSR, we've got more reporting and detail on that than you could ever want, because we recognize that that's a critical number for us to monitor. And the good news is that number is bending in the right direction, even as we invest in new networks and greater capacity. Efficiency is helping us bend that arrow downward. And the other way that we're doing that is through large-scale renewable energy, which is helping us bend that number as well. But yeah, you're right on the money. That was a quick and early learning, and this is true for any customer. Where is your biggest source of emissions, and how do you address that in the most effective way? And for us, that was electricity.
Well, it's like, having my Nest thermostat, every month you get your little notice on how many leaks you had that month and where you are versus all your neighbors. And so, awareness really, changes people's behaviors, right? With Fitbits and everything, any kind of feedback, people start to, well, gamification, right? So, I saw a Cable Labs presentation the other day, and they were showing how they are reducing the amount of energy they're consuming over time. But when you start looking at it, it's like, well, as they get more fiber in their network, they're starting to, the more fiber is what's improving their performance. Given, the nature of fiber and all passive optical networks, AT&T is the largest deployer of fiber networks. Can you tell us a little bit where, what the state of AT&T's fiber network?
You're absolutely right. It's critical for us. It's a fundamental tenet of our business these days, and we are the fastest growing fiber installer in the country. We've got a goal to be in over 30 million locations by 2025, and we're going to hit that. We're already in over 100 metro areas. It's fundamental to our business, and so that should be good news, certainly for this audience. And it's good for me in terms of when I put on my sustainability hat. Fiber is and you touched on it already, actually. From a sustainability perspective, fiber is a winner because of the passive nature of it. It's more energy efficient, and we're trying to build that into the value proposition when we talk to our customers. The other thing about fiber is we're finding that it requires fewer truck rolls, right? So that's, again, less fuel, which is our second largest emission source from our perspective. And what we're finding is interesting is that I mentioned we get lots of surveys. We are a big supplier to a lot of our customers, and many of our customers are recognizing that they need to look up and down the value chain, to hunt for emissions and get them out of the system. And so many customers are now reaching back to their supply chain and suppliers like us to understand their carbon footprint. And what we're hearing more and more is, tell us what are the emissions related to the services that you're offering, and what are some ways that we can reduce that. And so this is a new trend. We started hearing this a little bit last year, and it is building and it's building, and it's now becoming a roar. And so we're looking to integrate that value proposition. Not only is fiber great from a performance perspective, but it's also a winner from an emissions perspective.
Yeah, that's what our research shows, that fiber is going to reduce carbon emissions by 34%. So given the size of your network, as you upgrade your legacy network to fiber, how much is that going to contribute towards your gigaton and your zero carbon footprint goals? Feel for, is that a huge part of it?
Yeah, network. So when we think about the two goals that we have in place, one is for our own footprint, and I would say that the move to a fiber based network and network virtualization, so the use of software instead of hardware to do different functions, those are the big levers, right? From a network perspective. We're also, of course, working on how to optimize the cooling of the network, and that cooling is also a big contributor to our electricity usage. But you hit the nail on the head between the migration to fiber and the virtualization of our network, those are two huge levers we're going to pull towards as we pursue that carbon neutrality. From a customer perspective, we are their scope 3. Not to get too nerdy, but scope 3 is this. There's scope 1, which is your direct emissions. There's scope 2, which is electricity, and then scope 3 is a lot of different things, including your suppliers. So our carbon footprint is our customers' scope 3, which is becoming increasingly important to our customers. So that migration to a lower carbon network will show up as a benefit for our customers' scope 3, which is really important for our customers as they start to build out the full perspective on what their carbon footprint looks like.
So when you look at secondary benefits from fiber, so obviously work from home was a huge benefit during the pandemic and continues on, and just getting cars off the road. And our studies are showing that when every American's connected with fiber, that will eliminate the equivalent carbon reduction of taking 11 million cars off the road every year, which is pretty huge. One of the questions that came in from our audience is employee commuting emissions included in your calculations to meet your goals?
So, yes. The short answer is yes. We recognize that that the ability to work remote wherever you are, it looks like you're in a hotel room, I'm at home, right? That ability to work wherever you are does reduce whether it's commuting to a job or travel for a business meeting, and that is a component of our gigaton goal for our customers, enabling that kind of a reduction for our customers. For our employees, our employee commute, that would show up as our scope 3. And so it also shows up in that metric. So that's a big one. I will say that is kind of a foundational example, right? It's pretty obvious, it's pretty intuitive, and fiber certainly is a critical player of that. If you expand your aperture, and again, I'll just hit on those other areas, transportation, industrial applications, energy, and ag, where that is where we see the future, right? That's where we see we'll hopefully continue to allow flexible working like we're doing right now, but also looking for new smart climate solutions that are have the same kind of impact that commute avoidance does, or better even. We're looking for even higher impact examples, but certainly commuting is a good one.
When I look through your case studies, it looks like that you use a lot of tools to try to identify inefficiencies, like where, say, motors are working too hard and you don't have things properly tuned. Is that how you look at your connectivity solutions? Is just to make sure things are connected and you have better visibility to what's being optimized and what's kind of out of range?
Yeah, that's a starting point, because a lot of times, whether it's a fixed asset like a piece of equipment on a factory floor or one that moves around, without connectivity, you don't know what's going on until much later sometimes. So that's the idea of energy efficiency or operational efficiency is, I would say, the first pillar. The other pillar is this idea of transformative, just doing something fundamentally different, and leaving the old carbon-intensive way of doing things in the past because there's a better way to do it. And so I would say that, and we feel that oftentimes connectivity can provide the nudge that helps get over some of those barriers to doing something different. And I'll just use one example, which is the electrification of vehicles. And of course, there are a lot of barriers in the early days of electric vehicles. There were lots of barriers, battery life and just lack of, supply chain. There were a lot of barriers, but one of the other key barriers was range anxiety. And where am I going to get my next charge, right? And how am I going to feel comfortable driving an electric vehicle when I can't just go to the fueling station? And connectivity actually can help overcome that, because with a phone that can tell you how's your battery status, helps you plan your route, helps you see the next charging station if you need it, right? It helps overcome that barrier, right? And so, and there are other examples in other technologies that are nascent, but fundamentally change from the old carbon-intensive network way of doing things to the new low-carbon way of doing things. And then oftentimes we think that connectivity can help overcome that barrier. And oftentimes it's going to be big facilities that need high capacity, that need fiber, where fiber is a big player in kind of overcoming some of those barriers. Was talking with a carbon capture and storage provider, and they need a lot of connectivity at some of these facilities to be able to monitor and track that mode of sequestering emissions, so we're talking with them about the right connectivity solution for that kind of application. So the EV example is one that I think we can all relate to. There are more, and these are the kinds of big transformative things that are going to help us get to the gigaton. Quite frankly, efficiency will be a good contributor, because picking up a little bit of efficiency over a large scale makes a huge impact. It's not to be dismissed at all, but we also really like to think about the ways that we can be that transformative kind of leap forward enabler with connectivity.
Well, John, thanks so much for sharing this with us. When we did our global sustainability survey, key takeaway was Europe's way ahead of everybody else, and so it's good to see leaders like AT&T, helping to move the industry forward in North America. So we appreciate everything that you and AT&T are doing to drive our industry to a zero carbon footprint. Also, I want to invite you to join our sustainability working group, and I'll send you some information on that, because we really want to have the entire fiber industry moving that direction. And for our audience, I just want to thank everybody. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll get together next Wednesday. We'll be discussing Fiber Connect 2023, Let the Disruption Begin, with FBA Board Chair Joseph J.J. Jones of OnTrack, and our conference program director Rich Williams is going to outline what to expect at our annual conference in August, keynotes, breakouts, pre-conference workshops, and everything that's going to be happening at the Gaylord in Orlando, August 20 to 23rd. So you're not going to want to miss that. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys next Wednesday, or tomorrow if you can join us for a global sustainability webinar.
Thank you. Bye all.